Back when Walter's construction firm started cracking under debt, I bailed them out, $280,000 from my own line of credit. It was a risk, but I didn't hesitate. I knew how to fix things, how to patch the holes, balance the books, get everything back on track. I worked 70-hour weeks, managed the projects, made the decisions, and took the hits for things I didn't even decide. I wasn't just a guy doing a job anymore. I was the guy holding it all together, and when it finally turned around, they turned on me. They replaced me with Dana's cousin, Johnny, the guy who'd been hanging around the office trying to learn the ropes but didn't have a clue. The excuse they gave? I'd manipulated bids. I stood there in disbelief when Walter said it. Like I was some kind of crook. A guy who just saved them from financial ruin was suddenly the bad guy. I didn't even try to fight it. They had their story, and I was the villain. The night it all came down, we had dinner at Walter's house. He was sitting in his leather chair, sipping bourbon, like everything was fine. "You're too emotional to lead," he said, like it was a fact. Like I'd somehow failed them just by feeling something about all this. Dana didn't say anything. She just cut her chicken, fork tapping against the plate, her face as blank as ever. She didn't care. She didn't need to care. "You were meant to follow, not command," she added, her voice calm, almost clinical. That's when I knew. I wasn't even part of the family anymore. I was just a tool they used when it was convenient. I walked out of that house with nothing but a box of invoices and blueprints. The box felt heavy, but not from the weight of paper. It was the weight of everything I'd lost. 5 years went by. 5 years where they thought I was finished. They thought I'd just fade away, disappear like some bad memory they could bury under the rug. But they didn't know me. I didn't fade. I built. Those years weren't wasted. I started over. Took a low-level job at a rival firm, worked my way back up. I didn't ask for help, didn't lean on anyone. I just worked. And in that silence, that isolation, I got stronger. Dana and Walter, they kept going, kept playing the game, but every time they passed me on the street or caught wind of my name, I saw it in their eyes. A little bit of fear, a little bit of doubt. They thought they'd buried me, but they were wrong. I wasn't done. One September morning, a plain envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address, just "for Jason," scribbled in handwriting I knew. My heart skipped a beat before I even opened it. I hadn't seen handwriting like that since George Pickett died. George was the man who'd built the whole damn empire, the one I'd worked for, the one who used to trust me. I tore open the envelope. Inside, there were legal documents, old and crinkled, but still in one piece. The first line made my blood run cold. It was his will, signed by George himself. He'd left the company to me, not Dana, not her cousin. Me. My fingers shook as I read through the pages. This wasn't just about money. It was about everything that had been stolen from me. The trust, the respect, the whole damn legacy. The will had never surfaced when George died. They'd kept it hidden. I thought it was gone, just like the respect George once had for me. I'd been left out, erased, left to rot while Walter and Dana took everything. But this was the proof I needed. Then my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but the voice on the other end stopped me cold. "Is this Jason?" the man asked, his tone serious but quiet, like he was worried someone might overhear. "Yeah," I said, a little cautious. "Who's this?" "Wayne Mercer, retired paralegal. I worked with George's lawyer before he disappeared." That stopped me. "Disappeared?" "Yeah," Wayne said, and I could hear the bitterness in his voice. "He vanished after refusing to fake documents for Walter and Dana. Before he disappeared, he left a recording behind. The bastard had some spine, but that's not why I'm calling." I could feel my blood pressure rising. "Then why are you calling?" Wayne paused, took a breath, then came out with it. "The will you've got. It's real, but Walter and Dana made a forged version to replace it and bury yours. This isn't just betrayal. This is a setup." I could barely think, just let the words sink in. It wasn't just about money or control. This was something deeper, something darker. This was manipulation. They had set me up to fail. Wayne told me he'd held on to copies of the will for years. He'd kept quiet for a long time, not wanting to stir the pot. But when he heard about the way I'd been treated, when he heard that Walter had taken over and handed everything to his own blood, it was like a switch flipped for him. He was tired of being silent. "Look, I can help you," Wayne said, "but you've got to move fast. They'll be onto you once they realize this is in play." I didn't need more convincing. I started digging. I went to George's old law office, pretending to be just another contractor looking for records. I poured through stacks of dusty files, trying to find anything that could back up Wayne's story. I talked to old contacts, people who'd worked for George, hoping someone might remember something. The more I dug, the more I realized how deep the lies ran. Every move, every decision Walter made, it was all based on a foundation of lies. A week later, Wayne called me again. He'd found something. It was a receipt for the original will, signed by George, and dated just a month before his death. I felt my heart race when I saw the scan of it. George had left me everything, even though Walter and Dana had made sure I got nothing. But the truth, it didn't stop there. No, the more I learned, the more I realized that the will wasn't the only thing they'd hidden. They had erased every trace of George's trust in me. They'd doctored records, forged documents, and wiped me out of the family history entirely. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not this time. I backed everything up, every document, every piece of evidence, and made my plan. If they thought they'd buried me once, they hadn't seen anything yet. I wasn't just coming back to fight, I was coming back to take back what was mine. And I was going to make sure Walter and Dana never forgot who they had tried to bury. Wayne slid a small USB drive across the table to me in a diner off I-5, the kind of place that still thought it was 1992. He didn't look up when he did it, his eyes scanning the windows like someone was about to barge in. "Came from a box marked for shredding," he said, his voice low, almost too low. He glanced at the door again, making sure no one had overheard. "Inside, it's the real story." I didn't hesitate. I plugged the USB into my laptop, feeling the weight of it in my palm, like it could be the thing that would finally tip the scales. The file opened to a grainy recording. The audio was rough, distorted, but clear enough for me to make out George's voice. "It's Jason," George's voice came through, familiar but distant, like he was speaking from a grave. "He's the one I trust. Not Dana, not Walter. Jason." He paused, and I could almost hear the fear in his voice, like he knew what was coming. "I fear they will bury the truth. They'll make sure no one knows. They'll do whatever it takes to erase him from the family. But if you're listening to this, then it's all been hidden too long. The company is his. It was meant to be his." I couldn't breathe for a second, listening to those words. It was like hearing a lifeline thrown to me from the past, but also a death sentence for the people who had lied to me. The weight of the words settled over me like a storm cloud, dark and heavy. Wayne was already leaning forward, showing me the signed will. It was a copy, but it was unmistakable, George's signature. "This is the fake one they used, the forgery." "Look at this," Wayne said, pointing to the bottom of the page. They lifted that signature from a zoning application back in '99, cut and pasted it onto the will. I took a closer look. Sure enough, there were the telltale signs of digital manipulation. The edges too clean, the lines too smooth. It was as obvious as it was illegal. I felt a cold rush of anger flood me. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was theft, plain and simple. They had stolen what was mine and buried it like it was nothing. I'd worked for that company, bled for it, and they just erased me as if I never mattered. Wayne let me sit with the shock for a second before he pushed a small folder across the table. Inside were more records, old bank statements, contracts, old business dealings. I flipped through them until I found what I was looking for, joint bank records from 2000. Me and George listed on the same account. My name was there, right alongside his. It was a clear sign of our partnership, of the trust he had in me, the way we'd always worked together. But when I went online to check the account now, there was nothing. I searched for hours, combing through every system I could access, but my name had been erased from the records. I slammed the folder down on the table, fury rising in my chest. They didn't just cut me out of the company. They had tried to erase me from the very history of it. Wayne could see my frustration, but he didn't say anything. He just watched me waiting. I took out my phone and began taking screenshots of everything. Copies of the bank records, the will, the forged signatures. I backed it all up. Every single file, every single proof. "We've got a case," I said, more to myself than to Wayne. "Not just morally, legally." Wayne nodded, the lines on his face deepening. "But they won't just roll over. You're going up against Walter and Dana. They've got connections, money, everything. You've got to be ready for the fight of your life." I nodded, feeling a resolve set in. They thought they'd buried me. They thought they'd erased me completely. But I had the truth now, and the truth doesn't lie down. It doesn't roll over. It stands, and I was standing, whether they liked it or not. "We're going after them," I said, the words solidifying in my chest like a stone. "All of it. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what they did." Wayne leaned back, watching me carefully. "You better be ready for the fallout. This won't be pretty." I didn't care. I was done letting them pull the strings. This was my fight now, and I wasn't walking away from it. Not again. Evelyn wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed anymore. She'd spent too many years cleaning up after people, watching the world go by through the haze of old age. But when I walked into the nursing home, there was still something about her, something steady in her tired eyes. She remembered the day George signed the will like it was yesterday. Her hands shook as she handed me a faded photograph, the edges curled from years of handling. There he was, George, sitting at his desk, signing the papers. A lawyer in the corner, his face blurry, and in the background, me, young, eager, standing right there with him. And Dana, standing just behind George, her eyes on the paper, watching. Evelyn took a breath, her voice low. "I was there too. I remember it clear as day. George asked for you. He said you were his choice, not Dana, not anyone else." She paused, the silence between us thick with the weight of those words. "I can't help you with much more, though. They destroyed every original document. Everything's been burned or shredded. All I have is this picture." The picture. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a link in a chain I needed to pull apart. I sat for a moment, processing everything she'd said. "Will you testify?" I asked, already knowing how hard it would be for her to get involved. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll do what I can. But they'll know who I am. They'll come for me, too." I didn't want to admit it, but Wayne's voice echoed in my head. "They'll come for her." I left the nursing home with the picture clutched in my hand, the weight of Evelyn's words sinking in. I could feel the tension building in my chest. They'd been quiet for too long, but I knew that silence wouldn't last. If they were going to erase me, they'd stop at nothing to erase anyone who could expose them. Wayne and I drove back in silence, the hum of the road beneath us making everything feel even more tense. He was in the driver's seat, his knuckles white as he gripped the wheel. He didn't need to say anything. I could feel it. He knew what I wasn't ready to say. That night, I came home to find my apartment trashed. The door was kicked in, the locks busted open. My heart stopped in my chest as I stepped through the doorway. My laptop was smashed to pieces, the screen cracked like a spider's web. The drawers were ripped open, contents thrown across the floor like they'd been searching for something. But it wasn't the mess that hit me hardest. It was the note left on the counter, perfectly folded, like it had been placed there on purpose. I picked it up, my hands shaking, and read the words scrawled across it. "Legacy isn't given. It's built." That was George's saying. It had been his motto, something he'd said every time he talked about how he built the company, how he built his life. I stood there, the weight of the words settling over me. It wasn't about scaring me. They weren't trying to intimidate me into backing down. No, they were trying to remind me of who I was, who I used to be, who they tried to destroy. It wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge, and it was the last push I needed. They hadn't come to scare me. They'd come to remind me that they couldn't take everything from me. They'd come to remind me that I wasn't done yet. A message from Dana arrived late that afternoon, just as I was going over the documents again. "Meet us at the lake house. One last time." I should have known it wasn't nostalgia. That was the last place I'd been with them, before everything fell apart. But the truth was too clear to ignore. It wasn't a chance for closure. It was a setup. I didn't hesitate. I packed the essentials, the recorder in my jacket, the will, the bank records, everything I needed to make sure I didn't walk into the lion's den without backup. The lake house was the same as it had always been. Expensive, remote, a place where Walter could play at being a businessman while hiding behind a fortune he'd never earned. The place smelled of wood and expensive cologne, the kind that didn't quite mask the stale air from years of use. Walter was sitting by the fire when I walked in, looking the same as he always did, self-assured, like he owned the world. "Jason," he said with that smooth, practiced smile. "Good to see you again." Dana was sitting at the table, already pouring wine. She didn't look up when I walked in. Her face was impassive, her hands steady. She was waiting for me to play my part. I didn't say anything. I just sat down. They wanted to play their game? Fine. I was playing too. Walter poured me a glass of wine, and I took it. But I didn't drink. I let it sit in front of me, cold and untouched, while they made their move. Dana pushed a piece of paper across the table, thin, official-looking, a waiver. "Sign this," she said, her voice flat, "and we all walk away clean." I didn't even touch the pen. I stayed quiet. The room was thick with tension now, but they were too confident, too sure that they had me cornered. They thought I was just some guy looking to get a quick settlement. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't here to beg. I was here to make them answer. Dana's cousin, sitting by the window, let out a short laugh. "She doesn't need to carry Grandpa's mess anymore, right, Walter?" The sound of that laugh didn't sit right with me. It was too casual, too rehearsed. Dana's eyes flickered up, but only for a moment. Walter didn't move, but his mouth twitched at the corner like he'd been expecting me to break. The room went still, the fire crackling in the background, making the silence even heavier. They thought I was still weak, still broken. But they were wrong. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of everything I'd carried in with me. The folder, the proof, the evidence. They all felt like a dead weight in my hands, but now they were my shield. "I know what you did to that lawyer," I said, my voice calm, controlled. Dana's eyes went wide, and for the first time, I saw a crack in the facade. Walter's expression froze. The tension in the room thickened like smoke. I reached into my jacket, pulling out the recorder, and placed it on the table with a soft click. They hadn't seen it coming. They hadn't known that the words they thought were just whispers would be caught on tape. Walter's hand went to his glass of wine, but he didn't drink. His knuckles were white, gripping the stem. Dana didn't say a word, just stared at me like she was trying to gauge whether I had any real power in this moment. The recorder was still running. I didn't need to say anything else. The silence in the room was enough. The weight of what I had in front of me would speak louder than any words I could say. Walter shifted in his seat, his voice a little too tight when he finally spoke. "You think this is over, don't you?" I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. "No, but it will be when you pay for what you did." I didn't need to say anything else. They had their moment, and now I had mine. Wayne sent me the file on a Tuesday afternoon. Weeks later, after I'd already heard George's old message, Wayne found another recording, one that changed everything. I opened it immediately, the anticipation curling in my gut like smoke before a fire. It wasn't just another document. This was a smoking gun. The recording was clear, crystal clear. Walter's voice smooth and commanding, trying to convince Wayne to disappear. He was pleading, but it wasn't desperation. It was the kind of pleading you do when you're used to getting your way. "Protect the family name," Walter said, his voice low but urgent. "We can make this go away. You disappear, no one knows, and we all walk away clean. You'll be taken care of. We can make it right." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it sinking in. They thought they could just pay people off, sweep everything under the rug, the arrogance, the entitlement. It made my blood boil, but it also made something else stir inside me. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was war. I didn't wait long. I forwarded everything to the federal prosecutor. She'd been waiting for years for a clean shot at the Pickett family. This was it. The moment she'd been hoping for. She called me that same evening, her voice sharp and full of that professional fire. "You've got them," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice even though I couldn't see it. "Forgery, fraud, witness tampering. We've got a case. Let's go." We filed the suit. The wheels of justice started turning, slowly but relentlessly. The charges were laid out, black and white, in plain sight for anyone to see. And the media? Oh, the media latched on fast. Headlines screamed across the front pages. Pickett family accused of fraud and forgery. Construction tycoon under investigation for falsifying documents. Every major outlet picked it up. It was like watching a wildfire spread across a dry field, fast, uncontrollable, and loud. Dana sent me a text the next morning. It was short, sharp, and venomous. "You'll go down with us." I didn't even hesitate to respond. My fingers moved quickly over the keys, the words coming as easy as breathing. "I've already been down. This is me standing back up." I didn't care what she thought anymore. I didn't care what Walter thought. They had their empire, their power, but they didn't have the truth. And the truth, it had a way of cutting through everything. I stayed focused on what came next. The court dates, the interviews with reporters, the mounting pressure on Walter and Dana. Every little piece of evidence that came to light was like a brick being pulled from their fortress, one after another. People were starting to talk. Those who had been silent for years now found their voices, willing to speak out, to tell the truth. George's name was coming back into the conversation, and with it, a sense of justice that had been buried for far too long. But even as the walls closed in around them, I knew they weren't done. This wasn't just about the law. It was about taking back what they'd stolen, about proving that I wasn't going to let them erase me. The media frenzy reached its peak. Cameras, reporters, the whole circus. Walter's face was everywhere. His smug smile started to look more like a mask, cracking under the pressure. Dana, too, was losing that tight grip on the public image she'd worked so hard to build. They were unraveling, fast. I felt the weight of it all, but I also felt something else, relief. For the first time in a long time, I was finally taking back control. And as much as they wanted to spin their story, to twist the narrative, the truth had a way of shining through in the end. I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled. Reporters with cameras flashing in my face. The sound of shutters clicking like rapid fire. The air was thick, stifling, and I could feel every inch of it pressing in on me as I sat there at the defense table. The judge's gavel echoed through the room, signaling the start of the day's proceedings. Walter's lawyer was already sitting there, smug, like he was just waiting for me to fold under the weight of the case. He didn't look nervous. He looked too damn confident, as if this was already over. "You're done," he sneered, a smug grin on his face, like he had it all figured out. I didn't respond. I just sat back and waited. I didn't need to say anything. I had the truth, and the truth was about to speak louder than any of us could. The prosecution called its first witness, the recording. The first one played loud and clear in the courtroom, Dana's cousin's voice admitting to the forgery. His words spilled out, crumbling their entire defense, like a house of cards caught in a gust of wind. "I did it," he said, no hesitation in his voice. "I forged the will. I thought no one would ever find out." The room was dead silent for a moment. Even Walter's lawyer seemed to hesitate, his smirk faltering just a bit. But he quickly recovered, shifting in his seat like he was trying to gather himself. Then the second recording, Walter's voice cold and calculating. "Make it go away," he told Wayne, the words heavy with the weight of a bribe. "Protect the family name. We'll make sure you disappear. No one needs to know." It was like a bomb going off in the courtroom. Walter's face twisted, the calm composure he'd had slipping into something closer to panic. His eyes darted around, but there was no way out. Everything he'd done was out in the open now. The truth wasn't just whispering anymore. It was shouting. Next, Evelyn's photograph was entered into evidence. She'd been George's housekeeper, and the photo she provided showed George signing the will, with me standing in the background, watching it all unfold. There was no way to deny the truth now. Every piece of evidence stacked up, each one heavier than the last. Wayne took the stand, his testimony damning. He spoke about what Walter had tried to do to him, how the bribery attempt had unfolded, and how he refused to be part of their scheme. His voice shook, but it wasn't fear. It was the kind of shake that comes from standing on the right side of things after years of staying silent. The judge listened, his eyes narrowing, taking in every word, every piece of evidence, as it built up like a storm on the horizon. Walter sat there, rigid, his face pale, like he could feel the storm coming too. But it wasn't just the evidence that was weighing on him now. It was the realization that he had nowhere to run. Then I stood up. I wasn't in a hurry. I took my time, walking over to the table, the eyes of the entire courtroom following my every move. I reached for the envelope. The moment was heavy with tension. I laid George's original will on the table in front of the judge, the paper crisp under my fingers, the ink still bold against the yellowed paper. The courtroom fell into a stillness so thick you could hear a pin drop. I placed the will down carefully, and then, without looking up, I read the words aloud, clear and steady. "If Jason stands before you, then you've found the man I trusted most." The room held its breath. It was like the words hung in the air, suspended by the weight of everything they meant. I could feel their eyes on me, Dana's, Walter's, everyone in that room. But I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. The truth was standing there in front of them, plain as day, and there was no escaping it anymore. I was done being erased, done being silent. This was my moment, and it was only a matter of time before everything they had built on lies came crashing down. The judge's voice broke the stillness. "This isn't just civil, it's criminal." The words hit like a hammer, sending a wave of shock through the room. Dana blinked like she couldn't believe it. Her eyes were wide, like someone had pulled the rug out from under her. Walter stared at the floor, his jaw clenched tight, like he was trying to will himself invisible. Her cousin, the one who'd forged the will, turned white, his face drained of color as reality sank in. The judge continued, his voice steady but firm. All holdings are to be returned. Charges will be referred to federal court for prosecution. The room seemed to hold its breath. The gavel came down hard, signaling the end of a long battle, and with it, the beginning of a new chapter for me. Outside the courtroom, the press rushed forward, their cameras flashing, their questions sharp. One reporter pushed his way through the crowd, shouting, "How does it feel to get revenge?" I didn't even hesitate. This wasn't revenge. This was repair. The words felt right. It wasn't about getting even. It was about setting things right, repairing the damage that had been done, to me and to everything they tried to tear down. It wasn't personal anymore. It was bigger than that. As I stepped outside, the air felt different. Not clean exactly, but real, raw almost. It felt like a weight had been lifted, not just from my shoulders, but from the world around me. The weight of a lie that had been buried for so long, finally uncovered. That night, I drove out to the lake, back to the same dock where everything had started. The same water, still and dark, stretching out in front of me like a mirror. I pulled George's old letter from my coat pocket, the one he'd written before everything fell apart. The paper felt thin in my hands, fragile with age, but the words on it hadn't faded. I lit the letter, watching the flame catch, the edges curling and blackening. The fire consumed the paper, and as it burned, I felt something inside me release. The past, the hurt, the anger. It all burned away, scattered into the night air. It wasn't about closure, it was about letting go. A year later, I started the Pickett Foundation, Truth Over Power. It wasn't for legacy. I didn't need to build my name off their ruins. I did it because someone once believed I was better than they treated me, and I needed to show that belief wasn't misplaced. I teach construction law now, in the same city that once laughed me out. The same streets, the same buildings, but everything's different now. When they ask me if I forgive them, I say, I forgive myself for believing them. Truth doesn't shout, it just stands. And now, I stand with it.